Okay, good morning everyone. Let's get started with today's class. So today's lecture is lecture number 27 and today we'll be looking at upconversion mixers. We will move over to the next major topic which is on power amplifiers. Okay. So we are looking at the transmit chain right now. So what is going to be different? So we have looked at mixers in general, and I mentioned that many of the parameters that we talked about so far, although we did it in the context of a down conversion mixer, which is used in receivers, many of the concepts, many of the derivations are pretty much applicable to the upconversion mixers also. Okay. But there are a few differences, and so that is what we'll be seeing today, and we will move over to discussing about power amplifiers. Now, yeah. Okay. Right. So upconversion mixers. So how are they basically used? What is the entire transmit chain? Now, as I mentioned, we will look at the transceiver architectures towards the end of this course in greater detail. But if you know, I mean, a typical transmitter would look something like this. So you have the modem, right? So which gives out your I and Q bit streams. So all modern communication systems use quadrature modulation schemes. So which means that like even if you take something like QPSK as simple as QPSK, so there also you have the I and the Q in phase and the quadrature data which is coming in. Now, if you look at typical LTE standards, they might be using something like a 16 QAM signal and so on. And if you look at things like maybe the upcoming 5G standards, they will be going up in the QAM number. So it can be 32 QAM or 64 QAM. People are also trying to demonstrate 256 up to 1024 QAM. People are trying to demonstrate in research, right? So nevertheless, whatever be the modulation scheme that is used, you basically have both I and Q data streams which are coming out, right? So these two go through digital to analog converters, right? You have two DACs which convert the digital bit stream to analog signal. Now this is basically your, let's say, IBB and the QBB streams. So this is basically digital bits, and here it is baseband analog signal. Okay. Now the DAC itself will include a low pass filter. So let me just put DAC plus low pass filter. I mean, many times it is used separately, but let's just say that, for the purposes of our discussion here, you have a D to A converter, a DAC, which is followed by a low pass filter. Pass filter is required to remove all the DAC images or the images of the signal at the multiples of sampling frequency. Right? Now these two things, these two signals need to be up converted, right? Now these two are baseband analog signals which need to get up converted to the RF signal, right? So what we do, we mix it with the local oscillator, right? So this is going to be your in phase LO and this is going to be your quadrature LO. Okay. Now what are we doing here? So probably this can be written as, let's say, A cos omega LOT, and this will be A cos omega LOT plus 90 degrees or A sin omega LOT. Basically quadrature separated waveforms. Okay, the separation is basically 90 degrees. All right. Now what happens here is, after you mix, what do you need to do? You need to have an inherent band pass filter, right? So this has to be somehow built into your system, because we know that when you mix these things, and the LO is going to be a square wave for all practical purposes, right? Or even if it is a sinusoidal wave, we know that the mixer is basically going to do multiplication with a square wave. That's what we have seen, right? So it will have the baseband signal replicated at all the harmonics of the LO signal, correct? So we need to have a band pass filter to make sure that a band pass filter, or even for that matter some kind of a low pass filter arrangement, right, to make sure that all the other mixed components are, we kind of get rid of all of them. Now this is going to drive your power amplifier, or sometimes it is also called as your driver amplifier. Okay. Now on top, next what happens is you basically need to sum the two, right? So in phase and quadrature needs to be summed, and then you drive your power amplifier or your driver amplifier, which then goes through a band pass filter to your antenna. So this is typically your transmit chain. Okay. So this is what is being used in any wireless communication system, be it a Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, or even in all your cell phones, right? So we will look at the problem of generating these LO phases next, right? After we discuss about power amplifiers, right? As I mentioned earlier, we will not be talking about the D2A converters in this particular course. The MTech VLSI students are doing a course simultaneously. We will talk about the design of DACs and so on, right? Now, here we are mostly concerned about the mixer. So what are the requirements on the mixer? So what can we say? Or rather, let me say the this entire block is what we are looking at. Now, what are the constraints, or what are the issues that you are mainly looking? What are the things that you'll be really concerned about if you are designing a mixer in the context of a transmitter? What are the things that you'll be really concerned about?
Harmonic.
Harmonics. Okay, that's why we said that we will be, using a band pass filter there to kind of, get rid of the harmonics. You're right. So basically, the mixing operation that's happening is that you have a baseband signal, right, centered around 0, right, and this is multiplied with, let's say this is DC. You have, you know, um, you have FLO, and then you have, let's say, 3 FLO, and so on, right? Assuming 50% duty cycle, but when you use quadrature, it will be 25% duty cycle. So you'll have the second harmonic also, 2 FLO, right? Minus 2 FLO, correct. Now these two are multiplied, so you basically will have a translated spectrum at all the harmonics. So you would notice that I am using a direct conversion transmitter. I think nowadays mostly people just stick to direct conversion, because taking care of image, because if you do a super heterodyne transmitter, right, I mean, taking care of the image and other things becomes a big headache. So the modern design is pretty much, direct conversion. Right. So this is how your mixed down spectrum is going to look like. Right. So yes, what you're saying is true, that we have to take care of the harmonic. So basically, you will have some kind of a band pass filter which is sitting to kind of pass only the required signal and get rid of that. So that problem is solved. Okay. So which is why we have put the band pass filter. What are the other issues? Do you think noise is a very major issue?
Yes, sir.
Why?
Like in the previous we discussed, like the LO noise can interfere with itself, producing a disturbance in the desired phase band.
You're mixing two things here. I asked about noise, which is, thermal noise, flicker noise, and other things. And what you're
Okay.
talking about is basically self-mixing, right? Like you're saying that, LO mixes with itself and produces something. That's what you're talking about. Correct?
So, but that will be also noise, right, sir?
Okay, technically that's not called as noise by itself. That is called as, self-mixing. And again, the thing is that let's say there is some self-mixing here. This yellow goes and mixes itself here. You will have a DC and 2 times yellow, correct? Now, DC and 2 times yellow both are taken care of by the band pass filter. So that problem is solved. Okay, so we don't call it noise. We probably call it as, interference or, you know, spurious components and things like that. Okay. So if you recall, I had talked about noise in the mixer, and I mentioned in one of the things I talked about receive band noise, right? So there is noise in the spectrum, right? Like let's say there is some noise in the spectrum which can get upconverted, right? So the upconverted spectrum will also have some noise, let's say some kind of a noise here. Let's say your receive band is here and you're using a full frequency domain duplex system, right? That is your your transmitter is working at, let's say, 1.2 gigahertz, and your receiver, let's say, is working at 1.2 uh, 1.24 gigahertz or 1.25 gigahertz, something like that, right? So the noise that you are throwing in that other band, because of the coupler and other things. So the same antenna is used. If you are using a frequency domain duplex system, you will also have what is called as a coupler, right? Directional coupler. So this will go to the LNA, right? So there will be some amount of power that is, leaked through this, correct? And that can kind of interfere or even through the antenna and other things. So those things are all there, okay? So that can be the thing. But otherwise, to a first order, you really don't care so much about noise, right? Because you are talking about very large signals here. You want to deliver a larger amount of power. Like once we start looking at the power amplifiers, you'll know that we are, really looking at very large voltages and very large currents, right? So noise to a first order is not an issue unless you talk about receive band noise. Okay, RXBN, receive band noise. Okay, so otherwise noise to a first order is not an issue. Okay.
So, what would be the amplitude of the baseband analog signal, like the SNR?
Okay, so the amplitude typically would be very close to rail to rail.
Okay.
Okay.
So if our mixer has some noise figure, which will try to degrade the
Yeah.
SNR before it passes through the
Yeah.
gate, then we need to be worried.
Yeah, it will add noise, but then your signal amplitude, at least at peak amplitude, it will be, yeah, we will talk about the signal structure and how the signal looks and all little later, but the peak amplitude of both your D2A converters here, right, where is it? Let me say, yeah. So if this is VDD and this is ground, your signal might basically go all the way very close to VDD and ground. Okay. Typically, you try to kind of have as large signal swing as possible. So, which means which is the thing which is very critical? Is it noise or is it linearity?
Linear.
Obviously, it is linearity. Okay. So, for upconversion mixers, the main important thing is linearity. In your down conversion mixer, of course, the received signal itself will be very, very small. Okay, let's say it's a minus 80 dBm signal, and then you have some 10-15 dB as gain. Like you all have designed LNAs, and you know that single stage LNA has a gain of only around 10 dB or 15 dB maximum. Right, you can't get more than that. And let's say even you put another stage or whatever it is, like your signal strength is kind of around the order of some microvolts or millivolts, right? So that is where you kind of worry a lot about noise and SNR and things like that, right? But here your first number one issue is linearity. Okay, so which one would you use? Would you use a passive mixer or an active mixer? So we looked at passive mixers and active mixers, right? And what was our conclusion about linearity?
SA mixers are
Capacitive
good.
mixers are much more linear because all that the transistor is doing is that it's acting like a switch. It's either an on or an off, right? Whereas in an active mixer, there is the transconductance using the transistor, and we know that the transconductance is a function of the voltage, right? And only for small signals you have a linear transconductance. Otherwise, it's a fairly non-linear process. Okay. So the issues that are there, basically, what are the roles? What is the mixer supposed to do? Basically, of course, translate the spectrum from baseband to RF. And the important thing is that it needs to drive the input capacitance of your power amplifier. Now, next we will start looking at power amplifiers, hopefully in today's class, and we will see that you will use very large devices. Okay, so typically for the lower gigahertz range, the device size, the width of the PA would be somewhere close to W of the MOSFET for the PA would be somewhere in the range of 800 micrometer to some 2000 micrometer. Okay, just like extremely large devices. Okay. So usually what happens is you will have a stage before that, and the stage which is before that will also have what, something like hundreds of microns as the width. Okay, with the length being 60 nanometer, right? So the input capacitance is going to be significant. Okay. The C in DA or the driver amplifier or the PA will be very large. So it can reach to the range of even 1 or 2 picofarads, depending on the technology node you are implementing in. Right, older technology nodes you'll have a larger capacitance. Modern technology nodes also easily you'll have in the order of few picofarads. So your mixer should be able to drive such a large capacitive load. Okay. And the other thing is the mixer should be able to deliver the necessary swing to the PA input. Right? Now, why am I saying that? This will also make more sense as we start looking at the power amplifier. What happens is you basically kind of partition the gain, okay, or the signal swing over the entire transmitter range. So if you require a certain amount of large signal swing at the output of your PA, it requires at least a certain amount of signal swing at its input, and usually it will be in the order of some hundreds of millivolt. Okay. Usually 600, 700 millivolt signal swing is required. Okay. Now, again, linearity is the main thing. So it is, if you recall in the beginning of the course, we looked at cascaded nonlinearity. Right? So the mixer should not limit the linearity of your PA. For example, if this mixer itself is nonlinear and produces some IM components, then what will happen? The PA will short it even further. Right? So the mixer has to be as linear as to have high linearity. So how do we define linearity here? Basically, it should have a very high IIP3 or IIP2 and so on. Okay, so the linearity of the mixer is the number one parameter that you look for. Okay, and which is why most of the transmitter systems will have a passive mixer in its part. Okay. And what about DC offset? So what happens is, of course, this we will see a little later in today's class, right? What happens is that, like, if there is some offsets, right, uh, the DC offset will become, it will lead to carrier feed through. We'll discuss it in one of the subsequent things. And the other thing is, what is the interface? Single-ended interface or differential interface? So this depends on your PA. The PA can be either single-ended or differential. Okay. So if you have a single-ended PA, then what you need to do is you need to convert differential to single-ended at the output of your mixer. So how do you do that? So you can use a Balun or a transformer and do that. Or sometimes the power amplifier itself will be, many times the power amplifier itself will be differential in nature. So in that case, you don't need to do the differential to single-ended conversion at the output of the mixer. So that is also something which is decided based on your entire chain. Now interfaces with the DACs. So many times what will happen is the DAC will have a certain input common mode voltage, okay, or rather let me say the output, okay, and it will also be able to have only impedance seen by DAC plus LPF. Okay. So these are two things that you need to keep in mind, right? So the DAC plus LPF will, at this particular node, will send the signal with a certain common mode voltage. Okay. So whether that common mode voltage should be, your mixer should be designed such that it can handle that common mode voltage. That is important. And also sometimes there will be requirements saying what is the impedance seen at the input of the mixer. Okay. So that will also depend, that will also determine how your LPF behaves and so on. So these are all the different things that we are concerned about when we talk about designing the mixer in an upconversion path. Alright. Okay. So now let's see how you can implement a passive mixer. Now we all know how to do a passive mixer, right? So basically you just take so how will the waveforms look like? So before we go into the implementation, let's just say, your baseband XBB of T, is kind of going to look like a very, slowly varying waveform like this, right? Now, how is your RF LO signal going to be? LO of T is going to be what? It's going to be a very high frequency signal, right? So it is going to be like as if you're going to sample this baseband waveform at a very high frequency, correct? So your architecture or the signal, okay, let's look at a differential. If you look at a single balance mixer, how is it going to be? This is going to be LO. Let's say this is X dB of T. LO bar XRF bar. Okay. So this is how your passive mixer, single balanced passive mixer would be. If you have a fully balanced passive mixer, how will it be? Let's say you have LO Okay, don't get scared by this connection. It just basically means that both the gates are connected together. Okay, and we will say that okay, this and this are connected to, let's say, XBB of T. This is LO of T. This is LO bar of T, and these two mixers are going to get connected to XBB bar. Bar meaning like it's the complement. Okay. Instead, you can also say that BBP, and this is, let's say, BBM plus and minus, right? Fully differential stuff, and then this is going to get connected like this. Connected like this. Okay. So let's say this is RFP, this is RFM. Okay. So this is the same mixer, only thing now your baseband and RF positions are now changed. And now this is going to drive, as I mentioned, the next stage driver amplifier or something. So you are going to have some, let's say, Cin on both sides. Okay. So this is how it is going to be, right? All right. Now, what are the different issues that we need to deal with? The first issue is basically bandwidth. So if you look at this particular uh, diagram that I've written, or this particular circuit, okay, what is the bandwidth? Kind of the typical, so here it is about, what is the on resistance and the capacitance, right? So the bandwidth can be kind of written as, what? It depends on 1 by 2 pi the on resistance and the C total. Now the C total is going to be both, C switches plus C in, correct? So there is going to be parasitic capacitance here because of the C switches, right? And you also have the input capacitance of the next stage, right? So the on resistance, when the switch is conducting, right, you want your signal to quickly, your capacitor should quickly charge to that particular value, right? Your bandwidth is restricted by this, right? So for example, if you are having a very large capacitance, then your bandwidth will start going to fall down. Okay, so if you R on is increased by increasing W, right, which will lead to what? The switch capacitance increasing. Right? If you make a wider device, we know that the on resistance will go down, but it will also increase the capacitance of your this thing. Okay, so basically there is a very kind of a fundamental issue, fundamental limit to which you can increase your device size. Okay, so what can we do? What do you think can be a solution? Let's say at 1 gigahertz it's working fine, but once you move to, let's say, 3 gigahertz and all that, like, the capacitor is struggling to charge. What will you do? What do you think is a you understood the problem, right? Like now it's basically a sampling mixer, and if you are kind of stuck with the R on times C limit, can we do something? So how did we handle this bandwidth problem in LNAs? You guys understood the question, or you want me to repeat? Yeah, so the problem here is, you can see that it is a switch with a capacitor. Okay, you can, when the switch is on, you can approximate it by saying it is an on resistance of the switch with some capacitance, and this capacitance is the switch capacitance plus the input capacitance of the next stage, right? Now, because you are switching at very high frequencies, right, you are switching at RF frequencies, now this R and C is going to kind of limit your bandwidth, correct? As you switch faster and faster, the capacitor may not fully charge to whatever value is supposed to be charged, right? Okay, and if you try to improve this by increasing, R on is reduced by increasing W, and if you do that, you will increase the switch capacitance. Right? So you're kind of stuck in a problem, right? If you want to use this at, let's say, 3 gigahertz, 4 gigahertz and all that, you will encounter this problem in a very real way. So how can we get around this problem? The problem of bandwidth.
So should we go for inductors?
Exactly, that's the solution. Okay, so what you would do is basically you'll say, okay, I'm going to put an inductor here. Okay, so essentially it is like saying that I'm changing the load of the mixer. Okay, so in other words, we say that we use a tuned load or resonant load. Okay, resonant load for the mixer. So if you use a resonant load, obviously it is tuned to basically FRF, correct? So then what happens is, it basically provides you with fairly good amount of, you have the bandwidth. Now this becomes a band pass filter. Now this inherently you have designed a band pass filter, right? It takes care of DC. It also takes care of all your harmonics. So inherently you have built in your band pass filter as well. And at the same time, because of the resonant network, at resonance the load seen by the mixer is, uh, it's high. I mean, like the real part and the imaginary part come into the picture, and so now the mixer is able to work efficiently. Okay, so a resonant load is used for your mixer. All right, so that is what we do. All right. Now, the next issue that we need to talk about is quadrature summing. So, which basically means that, we, in this particular diagram, we have seen how to do this mixer. We have included the bandpass filter also, right? Now, how to do this summing? Okay. Now, a passive mixer, right? Passive mixer works with voltages, correct? Whatever we have seen. Of course, you have current commutating mixers also, right? But in other words, what is happening is your passive mixer basically works with voltages, right? There is a switching voltage, there is a VBB, I mean the baseband P and the baseband M, which are getting switched appropriately. Okay. Now, voltage summing is very difficult, correct? You cannot use, you can't think of op-amp based summers and all, right? Why can't you use an op-amp based summer? What do you think is the problem? Right? Usually, the moment you talk about adders or summers, analog summers, what do you say? You'll usually use an op-amp based summing amplifier, correct? But do you think you can use it at RF frequencies? Do you think, or you can use it in these transmitters? If yes, how? If no, why? Come on, it's okay. I mean, you can voice your opinion. It's okay even if it is not correct. We are here to learn, right? So
There are normal op-amps usually have had some poles around megahertz kind of things.
exactly, correct, right? That's the, let's say, a right answer. Right? The unity gain frequency of your op amps, right? UGF, unity gain frequency of your op amp will be in the order of some megahertz, right? You definitely cannot use it in the gigahertz range. Now, even if you design an op amp, usually the bandwidth of op amps is very limited. Right? Your unity gain frequency itself is this much, like even, I mean, this is the best that you can get, like that is for unity gain feedback. Otherwise, your normal open loop 3 dB bandwidth will be in the order of some kilohertz, that's all. Okay. Not only the commercially designed, commercially available op amps, even if you do the design of an op amp, I mean, next semester, in the odd semester, I teach a course called as analog VLSI circuits, where we'll be looking at how to design op amps, how to design baseband, low frequency analog circuits using CMOS. We'll be covering all those things, which is offered as an elective to the 7th semester BTech students, and it's a compulsory course for MTech VLSI students. So there we'll be saying, so usually, your bandwidth is quite limited. You cannot use, okay? So op amps do not work. Okay. So what can you do? So you cannot do voltage summing, it's very difficult. You only have to do current summing. Okay. How do you do current summing? So for voltage summing, you have to put things in, series. But even if you look at a summing amplifier, what are you doing? You're basically doing current summing, right? What is current summing? You may add multiple branches to the same node, right? So if you have one node and you have currents adding up, right?
Provide a path for.
Correct. So you basically do KCL current sum. Okay, current summing is the easiest, and that is what is usually done on chip also. Okay, so one of the techniques that people try to use is basically to use a passive mixer, and then they will use a V2I converter. Okay, and then they will do summing. So this is one way by which people do. So let's say this is the I path, this is the Q path, right? So the summed currents, then you have an I to V happening. Okay. So in the textbook you would see like how you can use a a transistor to transconduct and all that. So but again you will end up with a lot of linearity issues and so on. So typically people don't use these things. There is the concept of people trying to look at the currents. So this is one way. This is what the textbook says. But then in industry, typically what people do now is basically do something like this, right? So you use 25% duty cycle LO, and what happens is only one mixer is active at any given point of time. Okay, let's say this mixer is active only for 25% duty cycle. Okay, let's say this is the I mixer, and the Q mixer is also what is going to be like shifted 25%. Okay, and so what happens is now you can sum things together. People have patented these things. There are different variants of these things. Okay, and this is what people do. You cannot. I mean, this V2I converter and other things are all very non-linear. Okay. So people have come up with different things. People have published and patented and so on. But what the concept is, which is why you will see many times people using 25% duty cycle LO or sometimes even 12.5% duty cycle LO. Okay. And there is another concept called as harmonic mixers and so on that I will cover in the transceiver architectures thing. So, but by making sure that one mixer is acting, I mean, at any given point of time, right? Either one mixer is active or the switch is off. Okay. And of course, the complementary will be what? Okay. Sorry. So the LO phases. Okay. Let me just write the LO phases here. Okay. Maybe I'll just take some portion here. So the LO will be like this. 25% duty cycle. This will be LO 0, and LO 180 will be like this. Half the time period, and then right, you will have LO 90 will be here. You will have non-overlapping clock phases. Okay, and then again here you will have, and LO 270, which is the LOQ bar, will look something like this. Okay. And so on. All right. So this is how people generate the waveforms, and people do mixing, and then because both nodes are not writing at the same time, you can just kind of sum together. There is a lot of math which goes beyond it, and I mean goes into it and so on. But this is how summing is basically done now in typical implementations. Okay. All right. Now the other thing is basically offsets. Now what is an offset? Right. So here, if you look at this particular thing, let's take the single balanced one. Like you have two switches, right? LO and LO bar. Now, if you look at it mathematically, you can say that you are either switching it to one side or you are switching it to the other side. You say it's a square wave signal, right? You either this +1 or -1, and there is no DC term, correct? Now, but if there is some offset between these two transistors, M1 and M2, what is offset? As I have mentioned earlier, see, no two transistors will be identical on a chip. Okay, you cannot have perfectly matched transistors on chip or perfectly matched resistors or capacitors or anything. There are different mechanisms by which they change, and even if you take care of gradients and other things, like there is some random dopant fluctuation. It's called as RDF, right? Random dopant fluctuation. Now, this causes mismatch between transistors, resistors, capacitors, everything. Okay. So this is captured by saying that there is going to be some small VTH mismatch. So for example, the threshold voltage of M1 can be, let's say, 370 millivolt. Okay, and VTH2 can be, let's say, 380 millivolt. There is some 10 millivolt mismatch between the two, which is very much possible. All right, and this mismatch is coming because, you know, in the VLSI fabrication process, you're going to, you know, there's a lot of process which goes on, right? Like you infuse some dopant, you do some diffusion, you do some polishing. All these things will have some small errors, right? And these things all will accumulate over different processing steps, right? At the end of the day, you will have one device with a smaller, higher or lower threshold voltage than other. Now, what will happen? It may basically means that when you give a large sinusoidal input, right? Or let's say your input is going to be like this, right? Right? And one is switching, let's say, here, and the other is switching here. Let's say M1 is switching M1 will switch at this point itself, right? Whereas M2 will switch at a little higher point. Okay. Now these kinds of offsets will introduce a DC term in your signal. Okay. How will it so your switching signal S of t, right? S of t, usually you will say, okay, it is some A1 times cos omega LOT plus A2 times cos 2 times omega LOT and so on, right? Now, in addition to this V offset will introduce some DC term. Okay. Now, what is your final RF signal? Your VRF will be written as, ideally you will basically have A1 cos omega LOT plus A2, let's say, cos 2 omega LOT and so on, multiplied by let's say some m of t cos bb of t, omega bb of t. Let's say this is your baseband signal, right? Now what will you get? You will basically get some constant k times cos omega LO plus omega bb of t. This is what you want, right? But now what is happening is, in addition to this, you also have, let's say, some constant term plus A naught. Okay. Now this plus A naught term will result in, this plus A naught term is actually going to get, kind of going to get added into your baseband term. So what this will result in is basically, so this will mix. So the way, the way it is modeled is this plus some A naught term will come. Okay, so you will get plus some A naught term, some, let's say, some K2 times cos omega LOT. In other words, what happens is, because of these offsets, okay, there is going to be the spectrum. If you see, the spectrum is going to have one peak carrier, and also you will have the actual upconverted signal. Okay. So this is what is called as carrier feed through. Okay. Carrier feed through happens because there is an offset voltage which is going to come into the picture. Okay. Now this problem, right, will basically now not only here does it come in, but it also can arise from the DAC offset also. Okay. So the DAC offset also will kind of start having come into the picture. Okay. So all these things are going to get combined into this carrier feed through, and this is a problem. So you don't want to waste your power transmitting the carrier, because it does not do anything. Okay, and that only will mess up your signal. So you try to do techniques which are to get rid of your carrier. Okay, so a lot of effort goes into, offset cancellation, DC offset cancellations, and so on, to get rid of this carrier feed through problem. All right. Okay. Now the other thing is using active upconversion mixer. right? So we have already seen, I mean, you can use a Gilbert cell mixer, right? And what do you think will be the difference between a down conversion Gilbert cell mixer and an up conversion Gilbert cell mixer? What do you think it's going to be? Let's say this is not RFP. What do you think will be different between a down conversion active mixer and an up conversion active mixer?
The resistance which will be replaced by capacitors
Capacitor
and the capacitor will be replaced by resistor. And basically, we have to change the low pass filter to the band pass filter or high pass
correct.
filter.
Very good. So you cannot have a low pass filter here because otherwise, if you put a low pass filter, of course, the whole purpose is lost, right? So you need a band pass filter, right? So in order to have a band pass filter, you basically have inductors. Okay. And of course, you will also have some capacitor here to make sure that this acts as the band pass filter. Okay, so the load is changed. That is how you basically have it. And as I mentioned before, when you have large swings at your baseband, right? This, let's say transistor M1 and M2, M1 and M2 non-linearity is a very severe thing. So sometimes you might put some, uh, linearizing, you can do some linearization by using some negative feedback by putting some degeneration resistors and things like that. Okay, so there are people who try all these different things in order to linearize the transconductor. Okay, and so this is how it happens. Now, how can we do quadrature mixing? Sorry, quadrature summing. Quadrature summing is easy because now you already have a transconductor, right? So you will basically have a I mixer and you'll have a Q mixer, right? Both of them. So you'll have, let's say, um, you'll have, let's say, LO0, LO180. Here you'll have LO90 and LO270, correct? And then you'll have BB, let's say IBBP and IBBM. Here you'll have QBBP and QBBM, right? And then finally you will basically just sum it using this thing, right? Of course. Okay. So this is it's fairly easy to generate quadrature summing here. All right. So with this, I'll conclude today's class. I didn't have time to go through power amplifiers. I'll take it in tomorrow's class. Maybe what we will do is let's for the quiz 2 we will have till mixers till this point. Okay, and I will try to give you an assignment which you can use as reference to prepare for your exam. All right. So the questions will be more like, some of them will be analytical, where based on how we have done things here, you will have to learn how to, analyze some of the circuits. Some of them might be on the lines of design aspect. Okay. So I'll try to send by tomorrow uh, an assignment which you can use as a reference. Any doubts? Any questions?
So paper pattern would be similar to quiz one.
I don't know. I think you may have to. I don't know, man. I still haven't made up my mind. I'll let you know. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
You may have to have more things that you have upload, right? The objective part might be less, and you may have to read more. I mean, write more. That could be the thing. Okay. All right. Any doubts, questions? Yeah.
Sir, sir, I had a doubt from one
Okay.
old topic. Sir, if we have a PMOS over an NMOS, how do we calculate the noise figure for that? Like it's not cascaded.
Correct. So noise figure for that would be like, okay, let me just So you are kind of asking for something like this, right? Let's say you have a PMOS. Either it is like this, some V bias, or it is also connected to
Sir, it
connected
is
to the input
that
inverter,
yeah, it is not input, the output.
like this.
The gate of PMOS is connected to the drain of the NMOS.
Okay,
Yes, sir. Yes,
all
sir.
right.
Like this.
Yeah, if you
And we have an input at
okay,
NMOS.
right. So the way you do it is basically first, I mean, you kind of start with the basics, nothing else. Okay, so you know that there is going to be some 4kT gamma GM2 here. Because a diode connector transistor, as I mentioned, this is a diode connector transistor. This will also always be in saturation. So we can say that the noise is 4kT gamma GM2. Let's say this is 4kT gamma GM1. Okay. Now what you can do is you can go and write the, I mean, you can draw the small signal equivalent circuit. So the small signal equivalent circuit will be like this. So the gate is connected to the drain, right? So you have a current flowing from source to drain here, right? And the gate is connected here. Okay. So this is, let's say, GM VGS, and this is grounded. So this is GM2 VSG2, and VSG is what? This is VSG2, correct? And here, in addition to it, you have 4kT gamma GM2, okay? And then you also have what? The NMOS. The NMOS here again has 4kT gamma GM1, and of course the gate is here. This is VGS1, and this current source is GM1 VGS1, and this is, let's say, connected to your input. This is grounded. This is your V out. So depending on whether you are looking at the short circuit output current, or whatever you are looking, or you can also look at R naughts here. Okay. So if you are looking at the voltages, I would suggest you should basically look at the R naught, and you can calculate the output impedance. Okay. Or rather, you can calculate the output voltage, what it will take, right? And you will kind of know what is it. I mean, equivalently, you can basically say that this will be 1 over GM2. Okay. You can calculate the output impedance. Approximately, it will be 1 over GM2 for a diode connected load. Okay. And so these currents are going to get pumped into this effective output impedance, right? So if you want to just write it by observation, you can say 4kT gamma GM1 plus GM2 is the total current, noise current at the output, flowing through the output impedance squared. Okay, this is going to be a Vn out squared. All right, and R out will be approximately 1 over GM2. You can find out what is the output impedance. And there are different ways you can do it. You can try to calculate what is Vn out while setting Vin to be 0, and you can find it out. Or you can also, this is more like the shortcut method to find it out. Either way will work. Is it clear, Prashant?
Yes, sir. Sir, they actually were doing something. They were calculating gain, and they got gain as
Correct.
GM1 by GM2. Like we couldn't understand
Oh,
how it
okay.
came.
So, all right. Let me do one thing now. Okay. Let me just scribble over this. So, for calculating gain, okay, what you need to do is basically draw the small signal equivalent circuit. The same thing what I have drawn, instead of putting the current noise current sources, just don't put the noise current sources. Okay. So in the same thing, what can you write? This is V out. Okay. What is V out? What is your VGS1 is equal to Vn, correct? And what is VSG2? 0 minus V out, correct? Right.
Yes, sir.
So basically now with this, if you substitute, okay, what is your output voltage? Okay, V out, you can write the expression. Okay? You have two currents coming in and pumping into this, and you will, if you simplify it, if you assume the thing, you will end up with GM1 divided by GM2. There's another easy way to do it also. What you can do is you can find out that the output impedance is 1 over GM2. Okay, and the gain can be written as transconductance into output impedance. So that will give you GM1, the transconductance, divided by GM2. Okay. So this, of course, we will cover more in the analog VLSI course. So don't worry too much about it. But if you just kind of recognize that VGS1 is V in and VSG2 is minus V out, and solve this particular expression, basically do a KVL at this node, right? You will basically be able to get the same expression. You'll get a little more complicated expression with the R naughts, but if you derive it with the R naught and then finally say, okay, R naught is much greater than 1 over GM, you will get the expression GM1 by GM2. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Understood, sir.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thanks everyone. Have a nice day.